In this video, I'm going to talk about construction risks with a focus on temporary structures. So there are three different steps that should be considered in the risk analysis carefully, like erecting, altering, and dismantling steps. So when you want to deal with scaffolding or shoring systems, you need to consider all of these three important steps. So you can see in the top image like one of scaffolding collapses incident. So it shows that it's not always safe, and most of you guys, you experience walking through or in an area close to a scaffold, so you have been around the scaffold sometimes, and always we think that it's gonna be safe without any risks. But the question is, what is why we do scaffolding, why they are important? Because they provide access to a higher level of a building. So if you want to work in a higher level or somewhere above the ground, then you need the scaffolding, and they are useful to support some parts of a structure under construction, for example a bridge, and also they provide protection for the facility under construction. But the main risk or the key risk can be like the collapse of the structure, and there are a couple of items that can affect on the collapse. So one of them is the design process. If the design is a poor design, there is a possibility to get the temporary structure collapsed. But the main thing later is the supervision process itself, who is going to manage it, supervise it, or erect the scaffolding. Weather condition and the ground conditions, both of them are important, and during the erecting process, these kind of items can affect on the stability of the structure as well. So overloading can be one of the key factors as well, because your load, like the actual live load or dead load or dynamic loads or lateral loads, they shouldn't be more than the design, or shouldn't be more than the maximum considered in the design. So this is another issue that can cause an important collapse or injury later. Uh, and the last item is unintended use of the temporary structure. If you design this for a specific purpose and you install it for a specific purpose, for example, walking at the top level of the temporary structure, you shouldn't use it for other purposes, for example handling heavy materials. But the images here shows that you can use, like, pedestrian people and non-workers also can be users of the temporary structures, because they are walking around the scaffold, and also there might be collapses, or if the scaffolding or the temporary structure is not stable enough. So most of us, we experience walking around the temporary structure, but always we think it should be safe. But the data shows that it's not always safe. Like, there is an article you can find in the top link here, and this data shows, or the article shows, that almost half of NSW building sites, they have unreliable scaffolding. So this is a little bit shocking news, because it shows that there are some issues with this kind of scaffoldings probably, and we have risks related to this kind of scaffoldings as well. There is another news. I'm going to show you this in this video what's happening in one of temporary structures.
People are in hospital tonight, injured when 3 stories of scaffolding came down in a shock collapse this afternoon. Workers fell as much as 10 metres and were forced to jump for their lives when the scaffold gave way without warning.
A construction site in chaos after the scaffolding gave way,
It just started falling down like dominoes.
bringing workers down with it.
They were actually up on the scaffolding working at the time, and they've ridden the scaffolding down to the ground.
The structure was meant to make the 3-storey townhouse development safe. The workers were putting it up at the time. It was 10 metres high. Some of the workers jumped for their lives.
One of them jumped into the building from the top. Another one held on as it was falling off. He jumped straight off. So he was all right. But some of them were unfortunate to be in the middle. So they got stuck with all the metal and all the braces and everything on top of them.
Dozens of tradesmen were working on the site, but many were inside the building. They rushed to help their injured workmates.
Screaming, some of them couldn't breathe properly. And some of them were yelling out, who knows CPR.
5 men were treated by paramedics and taken to hospital. One man, aged in his 20s, and another in his 50s, suffered serious injuries. The site was shut down and WorkSafe inspectors have been investigating.
Okay, to have a safe or stable scaffolding, you need to ensure that all the connections and joints are reliable. So this is one of the key items should be considered when you do scaffolding. So for example, like the distance between joints shouldn't be more than 4 meters like that, and this one, and also from the ground level to the top, the first row of ties should be again less than 4 meters, and also the minimum load should be considered is 120 kilograms. So this is just a typical pattern showing that there are 4 meters distances between all the ties, but you can change the pattern, but you need to always consider this 4 meter maximum distance as well. So the risk assessment and risk control or risk management, the whole process is a joint responsibility of the main contractor and the scaffolding employer who is going to do the entire process of scaffolding, erecting and dismantling. And these guys who are using the scaffolds, then they need to collect reliable information from the designer and the vendor. If you search like the word scaffolding collapse, you will get a lot of results, and this shows that this problem is still a big problem, and there are so many different incidents only for scaffolding. If you search other kind of temporary structures, you will similarly find lots of incidents recently occurred. So what does it mean? It means we are talking about construction risk management for years and years, but still we have all these kind of collapses in different construction sites. So what is the problem? I guess in terms of risk management knowledge and theory, we know a lot. It's not a rocket science or complicated knowledge, but in terms of practice, we still need to learn more, or we need to follow all the procedures carefully. But one the key activity here is to learn the construction process itself and properly identify hazards. If you don't know the construction process itself, the different tasks of construction operation and relevant tools and equipment, then you wouldn't be able to identify hazards. So at the beginning you will get an issue because you can't properly identify risks. Also, you are good in the risk analysis and other steps of the risk management, but at the beginning when you don't know how you can identify the hazards and risks, then of course the entire risk management process is not going to be reliable, and the output is not going to be desirable. So here you can see different types of shoring system. A shoring system is like a temporary structure including many horizontal and vertical items that the whole system is going to prevent like the failure or collapse of a permanent or a structure, temporary structure. For example, here you can see the shoring system is going to support the bridge here. So the main bridge is going to be here, and you can see that there is a concrete pump here and many workers working at the top level. So the shoring system here is going to support the main bridge under construction. So this is like one types of prop post deck shore, and we have crab shore as well, or tower shore, and these three items are going to transfer the distributed load from the top level to the ground, and like this one as well. So you can see the arrows, red arrows at the top, they show like a distributed load at the top that should be transferred to the ground, and these shoring systems are going to help you to do that. And tower shower also is a useful shore for towers, like to give you access to the roof or the top level of a building. So this kind of shoring systems are important for the time you need to transfer load from the top to the down, but if you from the top to the ground, but if you want to prevent a specific structure or specific area in terms of lateral loads, then you need to use the trench shore or racker. So here you can see like one of them here, like is the, so here you can see like a formwork that supported by racker shoring systems as well. So this formwork here, you can see the formwork here supported by shoring system. There is another scaffolding method for industrial building or for tunneling purposes. So one of them is gantry scaffold that can be used for tunneling, and you can see in this video how this gantry scaffold is going to be used. So it is important to identify hazards related to the gantry scaffold. Since the workers are dealing with so many different types of equipment in like a tunnel like this one or in the construction sites, at the same time they need to interact with different kind of temporary structures, different types of vehicles and tools, then there might be so many hazards. Let's watch this video and show what is happening here. For example, you can see here like a different types of shoring systems. They use lots of scaffolding here, and you can see all of them. And this is like a roof. The concrete is still wet, and the concrete is still wet and hasn't been completed. And there is a concrete pump here close to this building. But watch this video to see what is the story and what.
Right now at noon, investigators have arrived on the scene of a massive construction accident downtown. They're trying to figure out why a two-story parking garage collapsed today. NBC4's Jane Yamamoto.
Part of it collapsed just before 9 o'clock this morning. It happened along the section of a two-story parking garage currently under construction. It is part of the Division 13 Metro project, which is a state-of-the-art bus maintenance facility. It's been under construction for the past 2 years. Now, just as they began pouring concrete, a safety inspector heard something. The weight of the concrete then led to the partial collapse. According to a Metro spokesperson, a full construction crew of about 150 people were on site.
The structure, as you can see from it, is significantly damaged.
This partial collapse will now most likely delay the project that was scheduled to be completed January of next year. Now, since no one was injured, Cal OSHA will not conduct an investigation, but that is not the case for Metro, the contractor, and the design firm, all conducting separate internal investigations to determine exactly what happened out here. Reporting live from downtown Los Angeles, Jane Yamamoto, NBC4 News.
So as you can see, the building, like the temporary structures and also the permanent structure significantly damaged. But the question is, who is responsible for that kind of collapses? Safety Work Australia provided a useful guide for scaffolding work, and it clarifies that all people involved in this process, all the people involved in this process are responsible. For example, the main contractor and also the person who is conducting the business. This guy has the main responsibility in terms of managing the risk, and they need to eliminate all the risks as much as practicable. So the person who is undertaking the business and who is the main contractor is responsible for managing the risk, and this person needs to eliminate health and safety risks, and all the processes of the scaffolding should be managed by this person in terms of risks. So this guy needs to be responsible for the provision and maintenance of safe scaffolding, and in terms of erection, alteration and dismantling, it should be all safe. That includes the safe handling process, storage and transport of the scaffolding. And the person who is going to install it, he has the direct responsibility in terms of the erection itself and all the tasks and activities related to the scaffolding. Of course, these two guys, like the person who is conducting the business and the person who is the scaffolding installer or employer, these two guys, they need to collect the required information from the designer or vendors or manufacturer, and also the designer, manufacturer and the vendor, they need to provide the required information. They need to make it available to the end users and people who are going to install it, and also the design process itself and the manufacturer process should ensure there is no risks to the health and safety of the user. So there is no risk related to these scaffolds, because they need to first of all test, and second of all provide the results of the examination to them. So the next person is going to be useful is like the officers on the site. They need to ensure that the entire process and the work itself comply with the WHS Act and regulations and all the safety policies in this specific, like in their specific construction project and company, and also other workers and other people around that who are interacting with the temporary structure or use it. They also need to follow all the procedures and instructions and policies related to the use of that scaffolding or interacting with that scaffolding. And this is the same story for other kind of temporary structures in the construction site. So here we need to talk about the process of the risk management. What kind of things are important? Of course, we need to be careful about all the tasks related to the risk management, but the most important one is at the beginning to identify hazards and risks. And if you are a good person in terms of assessing the risk, but you are not good enough in identifying hazards and risks, then you wouldn't be able to manage the entire process of risk properly. So the number one or the first important task is the identification of potential hazards and then risks. So you need to go and observe the construction site where you are going to do the scaffolding and where that temporary structure should be erected. You need to evaluate the construction site, the ground conditions and weather condition for that specific day you are going, or day, months, weeks that you are going to do this scaffolding, and use it. If you want to use it over weeks or months, then you have no control of the weather, but still you can identify risks associated with that. But controlling the risk is a different story. Later you can do that. You need to inspect the scaffolding before you use the items, like horizontal and vertical items, and specifically the connections and joints, ties, all of them, and before and after the use or during the erection process. You need to follow the policy, regulations and instructions, and also double check that every responsible people approved the documentations and paperwork or inspection reports as well. And then you need to review previous records if there was any kind of incidents or injuries related to this kind of scaffolding practice. So you need to talk to workers and all other people related to this task as well, if they are available to you. So based on that, you can get a better idea about the potential hazards. Then of course you need to assess it in terms of the likelihood of somebody being harmed, in terms of the probability of the hazard, and also how serious is the hazard. So then you can take a specific action, or then you can identify how urgently the action should be taken. So this is something you can properly do if you know the hazard. But if you use if you miss the potential hazard, if you're not able to identify risks, then it doesn't matter how accurate is the assessment process next step, or the controlling process is not going to be adequate as well, because you missed some of those potential hazards that can be still important. But then the next step is controlling the risk. So this step is very technical, it's not again theoretical. So you need to know first of all the construction process itself, then you need to have a plan how you can manage the risks. For example, can you use any mechanical tools like a crane for moving and transporting the items, like scaffolding items, or you need to do all that manually by using different workers? So if you can use mechanical tools, then you can manage the risk, because then it's gonna be more safe if you use like a crane or hoist or pallet jackets, trolleys, that kind of things to move the material in a safe way. And also the other thing that you can do is isolating the hazard. If you identify any hazard, then you need to see how you can separate that specific area during that specific task, and to separate like people to people, and isolate this area and separate people, so people is gonna be away from that specific risk or potential collision as well. The other thing is to like sort of technical controls. For example, if you need specific toe boards, or can you use any perimeter containment sheeting or overhead protective structures to prevent any kind of falling objects, then that can be also other useful tasks that should be considered. But this is like sort of technical, or little bit more engineering controls. And there is another types of controls which is more like administrative in terms of the nature. So you need to store scaffolds close to the working area. This will minimize the distance of moving all those kind of scaffolds manually in your construction site. And also, of course, it's very important, and you might know that the use of personal protective equipment is also very useful when you are working at the high level on a scaffold or under the temporary structure as well. When you're working under the temporary structure, of course you need like a hard hat, right, and protective hand and footwear and other kind of vests. You need to use all of them as PPE. Yeah, so what is the most important task in the risk management cycle is the identification of hazards. That means you need to know what kind of potential hazard are relevant to the temporary structure. And then the last stage is you need to know different tasks and tools and equipment available or possible to be considered for controlling the risk. So when you want to control the risk, you need to know you should do everything manually, or there are any kind of useful tools or different types of cranes to be used, for example, to do things like by machineries and equipment, rather than doing all that manually. So thank you for watching this video.